What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the game week preview for game week 27. We're also going to go through some transfer tips as well, because I know a lot of people have got Harvey Barnes. There's lots of questions about who to replace him for. We're going to look at selling Bruno Fernandes. City defense, is it time to come off? Who should we swap to? Should we use transfers to kind of swap between different Man City players? Then I got a bit of a Q&A at the end to cover all the other bits. There's lots of stuff there, like Gareth Bale, regular, when choose the triple captain. Should you play Forster this week? All that stuff is answered in this video. It's packed with content. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you do, as always, give it a like. Hit subscribe if you're new around here. Let's jump into the first one. Let's kick off with Harvey Barnes replacements, right? And there's lots of options to choose from, because I would say there isn't really a standout player to go to. Like, sometimes you get situations where, just as an example, Bruno Fernandes will get injured and Mane will have really good fixtures for Liverpool. Let's say everyone already owns Salah, and most people will just do that switch. With Barnes, I don't think it's that simple, right? I've got 6 players on screen. I will quickly do a few caveats. One, if you haven't got Gundogan and you haven't got Triple City, then he seems like a no-brainer this week. Rafinha is also a really good option, but I'm just assuming that a lot of people at this point already own him. And I should say, for the Aston Villa player at the bottom, we've got Bertrand Traore. That could be El Ghazi, but as soon as Grealish is back, there's a chance that El Ghazi goes back out of the team, especially if they keep Barkley in there. I actually kind of prefer El Ghazi to Traore while they're both playing, because he doesn't like to not take a shot, right? Once he's in front of goal, he shoots. We like greedy players in FPL. El Ghazi's numbers are also pretty good, and he's on penalties. The thing with Traore is, if it's someone you want to keep a bit longer, where you don't want that worry of Grealish coming back, then he is going to play on that right side no matter what, pretty much. That's what we've seen so far. Dean Smith doesn't change that team around very much. He seems to have that right side spot nailed, and not many people are talking about him, right? The other players we got are Saka, Lingard, Lucas Moura, Neto, and Mason Mount. I've got their XG per 90 for the whole season, so I'm not looking just at recent stats. I want to see how they performed over the whole season. The longer you can keep these numbers up, the better. So one player I would possibly discount straight away is Lucas Moura. 0.25 expected goals per 90. Pretty low, to be honest, right? It's not that great. And also, you're not 100% sure he's going to start every single week. Kane and Son, definitely. Bale, potentially now, if he can keep his fitness up. Outside of that, Lucas Moura, it could be Lamella, it could be Bergwijn, whoever it might be. When Lo Celso comes back, perhaps he gets kind of a little bit further forward. We'll know a bit more once we see the Fulham game tonight, right? This is coming out. This video is coming out before Spurs play Fulham, or before Everton play West Brom, etc., or before Liverpool play Chelsea. So we'll have a bit more of an expectation over what Lucas Moura's starting position is going to be like, right? If he misses out, then it'd be a little bit more of a worry. The fixtures are good for Spurs, but I'm just not sure I would go for him. Right? I would invest in Spurs, but not necessarily in Lucas Moura. Bertrand, I think, is one of the best options on this list, right? Not being talked about very much. Obviously, I've only chosen players for this list that are a good price. So 0.41 expected goal involvement. Most of that is from goal threat as well, which is nice. Wolves at home, I've basically put Wolves as an orange fixture for everyone, because on their day they can be quite defensively sound. Even City for a long time in Game Week 26 found it difficult to break them down. But then it's Newcastle away, they play in 29, then it's Fulham at home in Game Week 30. The fixtures do turn for Villa after that, right? They're not great, but if you're looking for a short-term investment, I think Traore is quite a good option. You got Mason Mount then as well. Really good fixtures. Everton at home, Leeds away. Doesn't play in 29. Now, I'm not going to tell you which player is the best one, because it will depend on your strategy. But fixtures very good for Chelsea, right? 0.35 expected goal involvement. It's kind of mixed. Most of that is from assists rather than goals. But not necessarily a bad option. Seems to be getting good minutes in Tuchel's side. Neto, I would hard avoid. I think Liverpool at home and a blank, not good, right? Wolves fixtures from, I think, Game Week 31 onwards get really good. Potentially we could look at buying him then. But until that point, I just wouldn't bank on Aston Villa away. And then West Ham at home is a fairly difficult fixture as well, because they're defensively so good. And obviously we're looking at attackers here. Jesse Lingard is someone I quite like. Leeds at home is a very enticing fixture, but although he can play in 29, he can't play in 28. So it's going to depend on what your bench situation's looking like, because in Game Week 28, he plays Man United, and because he's on loan, he can't play in that fixture, and then it's Wolves away. So I don't mind Jesse Lingard, and I think that Leeds fixture in particular, like I just said, is very enticing. But after that, again, I feel like you're waiting for a few more weeks until West Ham's fixtures get really good. And then Saka I like. The main concern I have about Saka is, will he continue to get starts? I think Arteta has said a few times that he's played too much, basically, for his age, right? They didn't necessarily want to play him as much, but they've needed him. He can fit into many different positions. But also, it feels like, at least from the squad they put out before the last Europa League game, that they're possibly concentrating on the Europa League now. It's probably their best shot at getting back into the Champions League is to win that. So if they're doing that, how many games will Saka keep playing? It's possibly not a massive concern because the next Europa League game, the match after that, right, he probably will start. But it's a little bit of a concern. Liverpool at home and Spurs at home in the next 4 as well is not ideal. But in terms of underlying numbers, he is the best on the list. I think right now, if I was looking for a kind of 4 to 5 game week punt, I would probably go for Traore out of all of these. Maybe Mason Mount if you want to go for the fixtures and you don't need someone for game week 29. Otherwise, Saka is probably the best option. I would just be slightly concerned about his starts. But loads of different options. If you're a Barnes owner, let me know in the comments below who you're going for. Okay, so let's talk about selling Bruno Fernandes, right? Because it's the talk of the town after he blanked versus Crystal Palace. And I'm not going to say I called it or anything like that because it's very easy to sit here and talk about selling him. Actually doing it is a different story, and I didn't do it ahead of game week 26, right? But I have mentioned it already, and I talked about this earlier this week before Man United played Palace, that I was thinking about taking him out for Kevin De Bruyne. You might be looking to take him out for someone different. I'm not going to go into replacements here, right, at all, but I'm going to talk about whether or not he could be sold, okay? Could be. I'm not saying he definitely has to be sold. So, looking at the fixtures, you got Man City away in a blank in the next 5, and one of those other fixtures is Spurs away as well. Man United against the top 6 have not done very well in terms of scoring goals. They're setting up not to lose those games. So Man City away is going to be tough. I expect Man City to possibly win that game. Spurs away could be tough if Mourinho decides to sit deep. And then you've got 2 other fixtures which I've put down as green, but West Ham and Brighton are both capable of defending, and Man United at times have found it tough to break defences down, especially when they sit deep. Now, when we played West Ham in the reverse fixture, it was the one where Bruno Fernandes got benched and he came on at half-time, I believe it was, and created like 6 or 8 chances in the second half, which was absolutely ridiculous. So I'm not putting it down as a bad fixture, but overall, the next 5 fixtures don't look fantastic. Now, straight away I will say he is not must sell, right? If you're looking at your team and thinking, right, Bruno Fernandes, Man City away, have to get rid of him, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. Is there someone that you really want to bring in where he is the best way to release funds, right? Yet no one's looking at their team thinking, God, I've got Bruno Fernandes, that's a mistake. He's the highest scoring player in the game for a reason. If you're selling, you're basically trying to take some risk and making a calculated gamble, right? You're saying that over the next 5 weeks, he will probably continue to score points. If he gets a good few penalties as well, then it really is going to hurt. But he probably will continue to score points. But I'm kind of gambling or risking that the points total comes down because he plays a really good team in Man City. He's got the blank and he's got that Tottenham game as well. And then the other 2, who knows how they might go, right? So you're taking that gamble that the points comes down. And you're also taking a gamble the player you bring in does better. So for me, I'm looking at Kevin De Bruyne, for example. And I know people don't like him. Like, he hasn't scored many goals this season from open play. I've seen all the stats. But his underlying numbers are pretty good. And I would say his fixtures are better. I would maybe potentially bet that he plays, if not 180 minutes in a double game week, so I think that's quite unlikely. If I could get 110, 120 minutes out of him, then possibly he does better, right? And I'm taking a gamble that he does better in the same fixture that Fernandes has, only that Kevin De Bruyne is in a better attacking team. The other thing to consider is you have got transfers and wildcards, right? Anytime you talk, like, first of all, anytime you talk about taking a big hitter out, you will get told it's crazy, right? He's a top scoring player. You shouldn't do it. It's a big risk, right? If you go and ask people for their opinion, most people will tell you that. If you want to do it, don't ask. Make your own decision and just do it, right? I would say that first of all. The other thing is, people always talk as if you can't bring these players back. If I do Fernandes and De Bruyne, yes, I'll lose some selling value on Fernandes, but I can easily straight swap back from De Bruyne back to Fernandes if I need him for captaincy or whatever it might be. So this idea of when you take out a big hitter, you cannot bring them back is crazy. I've sold Salah twice this year. I've sold Son. I've sold Kane. All 3 of those players are in my team. I didn't start with Fernandes. I brought him in. I haven't yet sold him, but I might do now. I had De Bruyne. I've sold him. You can sell big hitters and you can transfer them back in. That's what those transfers are for. And I would really think about captaincy, okay? And again, having a big hitter, not captain them, does not mean that they're a must-sell player. Absolutely, it does not, right? You can only have one captain each week. If you've got 3 or 4 heavy hitters or big hitting players in your team, you shouldn't just sell 3 of them because you're not captaining them that week. That's not how it works. But if there's a player that you want to captain instead, and you can't get to them because of Bruno Fernandes, that's possibly a good reason to sell them. So I won't go into it in too much detail because I've mentioned it in other videos. I've mentioned it on articles as well on Fantasy Football Scout, and I've tweeted about it as well. But I look at the fixtures for Man United, and in any game where I think I could captain Bruno, I feel like there's a better captain option. Right, so game week 28, he's got West Ham at home. I'd possibly be better off captaining De Bruyne potentially against Fulham. You could argue that Fernandes is the best captain, in which case keep him. If Everton versus Villa goes into that game as a double game week, then I would definitely captain Calvert-Lewin or Grealish if he's fit instead. Brighton in game week 30, well, Kane's got Newcastle. And then in game week 33, that's probably the next time I really want to captain a Man United player, which is when they play Leeds. But game week 33 is ages away, right? I can make that risk about maybe getting De Bruyne, who plays Leeds before Man United do, and just captain him for that instead. So you should definitely think about captaincy. There's obviously a risk taking out the highest owned, or sorry, the highest scoring player in the game that's also very highly owned. Like every week in the past few weeks, he's been above 100% effective ownership. And if there's no double game week in game week 28, I could see him being above 100% as well. So you are taking a bit of a gamble about his points potential. But I don't want to sit here and tell people it's okay to do it, right? That's how people frame the questions. Is it okay to sell Fernandes? You can do what you want with your own team, but you have to be prepared to take the risk, right? If he does really well, it could hurt you. Your rank could go down. If it pays off, it could go up, right? All you need is the replacement to do as well, if not better, and your quid's in, right? If Fernandes scores 10 points against West Ham, but you bring in whoever it is, right, and they score 11 points, then you're up, right? And then he's got a blank, so you might be looking even better. So can you sell Bruno Fernandes? Yes. I've talked about some things to consider. After that, the decision's up to you. He's not must sell by any means, but there is an argument to potentially cash in for now and potentially bring him back in the future. So I want to talk a little bit about double Man City defence, right? Is it still absolutely needed? Now, this week, possibly if you've got them, you're probably not going to look to transfer any of your players out. They've got a double game week, and obviously you're banking that they play twice, right? Whether you've got Cancelo, Diaz or Stones, you're hoping that they play twice. And after that, the fixtures aren't bad, right? Fulham away again, another good chance at a clean sheet. Then a blank. Leicester away is probably the trickiest fixture, although Leeds will give them a good game. And Aston Villa, if Grealish is back, they could too. And obviously they've got another blank in game week 33. So in the next 7 fixtures, they've got 2 blanks. And they've got games against Leicester, Leeds and Villa where, to be honest, the way they're defending right now, you could say they're all possibly clean sheets, right? So the reason to talk about them is not that I expect the clean sheets to come down, okay? They are the best defence in the league for a reason. The reason to talk about it is we're starting to see quite a bit of rotation, right? We knew Cancelo was a bit of a rotation risk anyway. He has started the majority of games over the last kind of 20 games, right? So I'm not massively concerned about him. But if you're like me and you own him and Stones, there is a little bit of a worry, right? In the last 12 games, which include 9 Premier League games, 1 Champions League game and 2 FA Cup games. Laporte's actually started 8 of those and Stones has only started 6. Now, I will say that 2 of the games that Stones missed were FA Cup games and 2 of the games that Laporte played were FA Cup games. So if you get rid of them, then I think it's 6 out of 10, right, for both of them. But what that shows is Laporte is starting as much as Stones is now. So I'm about to go into a double game week with John Stones, and I'm thinking, right, he's only going to play one of those games. Let's hope it's the Southampton game. And I think going forward, that's maybe okay for double game weeks because, especially in a small one like this, everyone else, that's not Man City or not Southampton only has 1 game anyway. So it's probably okay. But going forward, if he starts missing games in single game weeks, okay, you can call on your bench, but potentially there's better ways to spend that money. And I think for most of these players, right, I'm not going to get into attacking potential of Cancelo because I know a few people have said, well, he's only got 3 returns. When are these attacking returns come in? I think with defenders, you're always... you've always got that chance of the returns not coming, right? Because at the end of the day, you have some defenders that are more attacking than others, but their numbers are nowhere near as high as an attacker would be, like their underlying numbers. So sometimes you go through those spells of them getting attack and return after attack and return, and sometimes it takes ages, right? Cancelo is the most attacking out of these players. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's always going to get the points ahead of them, right? So I still like him. But with Stones, I feel like maybe, if his ceiling is 6 points, okay, sometimes 7 or 8 if he gets bonus. But in terms of goal threat, he doesn't have massively higher goal threat than anyone else. He just happens to have scored 3 goals in double game weeks, which makes him feel like a better option. But he's not a massive threat from corners or set pieces. He'll get his chances. But versus anyone else in the league, probably not that much better, right? So someone like Rudiger, for example, that I'm looking at, is cheaper, absolutely nailed on, is not missing a minute for Chelsea at the moment, and Chelsea's defence is almost as good, right? Doesn't blank in 33, although they do still blank in 29. So you're getting a player who's cheaper in a defence that's just as good at the moment as Man City, but they're going to play every single week. It also frees up a Man City slot if you wanted to go for 2 attackers instead. But ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to say here, again, I'm not like Fernandes, I'm not saying you have to sell them, but it's something you could think about. The reason a triple up on Man City was so good in recent weeks because they had 3 double game weeks plus a blank fixture, right? So they were playing a lot of games. There was also no Champions League, so there was no rotation. And in terms of, or not as much rotation because it is Pep Guardiola. And in terms of Stones, Laporte wasn't playing, right? He was out of favour. That's changed now. The situation around Man City has changed. Coming up, they've only got single game weeks. Are they the best defence? Yes. Can you be guaranteed that your player starts every week? Absolutely not, especially with Champions League, right? So I think it's possibly a good time to either switch to double attack or potentially just have 2 Man City players. That's okay, right? If Rudiger comes in and gets as many clean sheets as John Stones, or at least maybe even beats him because he's going to play more games, then you've got more points for less money, right? It doesn't. I think people get stuck into this thought that because Man City defence is so good, there's no other way to get defender points. And obviously, you'd always back Man City defence, but if the players aren't playing, then it doesn't matter, right? So that's just some food for thought. Again, I'm not sitting here telling you that you should definitely sell them, but I think there's an argument to be made that we could start to look to get rid. If you've got Diaz, absolutely no worries. He plays pretty much every game. But any of the other players, there are those concerns about game time coming up, I would say. So I just wanted to cover some of the other questions that came up. So is it time for a Spurs triple up? Reguilon versus Bale. I think, given that Dyer didn't start the last game, even if he starts against Fulham tonight, would you be that confident that he would keep starting going forward? For me, if I'm going for a defender, it has to be Reguilon at this point. And if I'm going for a third attacker, it has to be Bale, right? I'm not going for Lucas Moura, like I spoke about earlier. And Son and Kane are pretty much nailed in a lot of squads, and especially in mine, right? So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. It's going to depend on your setup. So if, after we've just talked about, you're still stuck on 2 Man... I say stuck as in if you're keeping 2 Man City players. Not a bad decision, by the way. Then you've only got 1 more slot. Perhaps if you've already got a Man United defender or a Leicester defender or Luka Dean or someone like that, perhaps you don't have a space for another Spurs player. So if you still wanted to triple up, I don't think Bale's a bad option. The only concern around Bale for me, which I've said a few times already this week, is fitness, right? Mourinho has said a few times that he's not been fit to keep starting. But if he starts against Fulham and then can prove his fitness, and Mourinho says he's okay to play against Palace as well, then suddenly you're looking at a very good player, possibly a differential, right? It could be him instead of Son. But I think the triple up for a short period of time, I'm not saying we have it for the rest of the season, but I don't think it's that bad an idea. I always look at these things in isolation, right? So if you're dead set on owning Son and Kane, and you want to add Bale, I don't care that I own Son and Kane. Is Bale a better option than the alternatives at the same price? So Bale versus Rashford or whatever it might be. And with Crystal Palace, a game in 29 and a fixture against Newcastle in game week 30, on paper that looks pretty good. Potentially a double game week to come early in the 30s, maybe game week 32 as well, and suddenly you're laughing. So I don't think Bale is a bad option. I don't think it's massively knee-jerk because I think he just looked good in that game against Burnley and against West Ham as well. And the beauty is, before you get to make a game week 27 move, you can watch the game against Fulham as well. The only major issue is if a game gets called off, but that's not looking very likely at the moment. So I don't think a triplet's a bad idea, right? I like Bale. I think he's looked. I think he's looked good. I've not even checked the stats really. I just think he's looked decent in those 1.5 games. So we're maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. If you're talking about Bale versus Son, for me, the easy decision is Son still, right? There's upside in going for Bale, but Son, you know, is going to play week in, week out, and we know he's going to perform and have the fitness to do that. So there's no question about that. Like for me, for example, if I go for De Bruyne, then I've got De Bruyne, Gundogan, Salah. Rafinha can play as well, and I can't actually remember who the other player is off the top of my head right now. But I have very little space to be fitting Gareth Bale in as well. Oh, it's Son, of course. Son, Salah, possibly De Bruyne, Gundogan, and Rafinha. And I've also got 3 forwards as well. So fitting in Bale is difficult, but I have Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm playing most weeks. He could easily switch to Reguilon. So for me, I might go 1 defender, double attack. And by the way, Reguilon playing every single week is not a guarantee either, just because Davis is there as well. So that's something to consider. But I just don't have a spot for Bale. Your setup might be different, right? So I don't think there's a right or a wrong. But a Spurs triple up with the fixtures they've got, I think it looks good. When to use a triple captain if you still got it? So I would still save it for a double game week. Do I think that Man City's double game week this week is the one to save it for? The only other ones right now that I know of are this one. So Man City versus Southampton and Man United. I should say Spurs, but Harry Kane and Son, etc., have got a Southampton at home game to rearrange. So Southampton plus whatever game week it goes in. That looks pretty good to me, as long as they're all fit and firing. And Everton versus Villa has got to be rearranged as well. So potentially a Grealish or a Calvert-Lewin captain. But for me, I would probably be saving it for that Kane game, because Gundogan will probably play twice, but one of the games is Man United. I think City will win, but I don't think they'll necessarily score loads and loads of goals. But they do have that Southampton game afterwards. So if you were confident that De Bruyne or Gundogan or Mahrez or Foden or Sterling or whichever one of a number of Man City midfielders had the potential to start against Man United and Southampton, then I think that's as good a time as any to use your triple captain. Otherwise, I think Kane. I wouldn't at this point. I don't feel like the need to use it in a single game week. If something goes wrong and Spurs get a double, but all their players are injured, then yeah, okay, maybe you just use it in a single game week then. But I don't think you need to worry about that. I wouldn't worry too much about the triple captain in general, right? It's just one extra score. Don't overthink it. Just save it for a double game week most of the time. Is Forster worth playing in game week 27? So he came in against Everton, which is obviously good for Forster owners. A lot of people have probably got him on their bench. I would probably play him. A lot of people have got Martinez. They're playing Wolves. I just think Forster's got a good... If he starts again, he's got a good chance of getting a clean sheet against Sheffield United. They're very goal shy. And then hope he would get saves against Man City, right? I think the only bad situation would be if Man City absolutely tank them, like 6-7 goals, right? Which I'm not sure would happen. And then you start getting into negative points. But I think there's potential for a clean sheet against Sheffield United. So I would probably start him. I would definitely listen to what Hasenhüttl says in the press conferences, though, because if he says, like, we just gave McCarthy the day off or something like that, then I wouldn't necessarily risk it, because you could get Forster in just one of those games. But if he doesn't mention anything, I'm sure he's going to get asked, then you could say that Forster's just won his place at this point. So, yeah, I would probably play him in a double game. I would take that gamble that Martinez doesn't get yet another double-digit haul. And last question, is it time for high-risk moves? I always get this question around this time of the year. People who are lower down the ranks want to make high-risk moves. And look, there's a difference between a risky move and a high-risk move, right? Because people have different definitions of what that means. So there's a guy I follow called, his handle on Twitter is Disable, right? With I think it might actually be FF Scout Luke now, I'm not sure, but you probably know who I mean. He triple captained Gareth Bale in game week 26. That's a calculated risk, right? Because he looked good against West Ham. Almost certainly we knew he was going to start against Burnley. Burnley have looked quite poor. They did really bad against West Brom. And he's going against the crowd. So it's a risk not going for like Kane, Fernandes or Salah. But it's a calculated risk, right? He's not just putting the captaincy on whoever. So that's a good move. But I think the week before he put it on Vestergaard. So again, double game week. Vestergaard did hit the bar. But for me, there are two differences, right? Vestergaard is an extremely high risk, I would never do it move. Bale is a calculated risk, and those calculated risks is where you want to look at to go up the ranks, because there's always this myth that you have to go massively different, 1% owned players, you're not really sure if they're any good, but what if they do really well? Well, the chances are they don't do really well, which is why they're so low owned. So you need to look for those calculated moves. So a Bale, Son, Kane triple up, that's a calculated risk, right? That could be decent. Going for someone, getting Diagne in, right? West Brom attacker, that could be a good move, but to then start captaining, for example, that's too high risk for me. The chances of that working out are very low, okay? And also, by the way, when you think of these moves, people always forget that other players are playing as well. So if Diagne comes in, you captain him, he gets 2 goals, brilliant, he gets 13 points. If the other popular captain is Kane, for example, he also gets two goals. You've not really gained anything on the captaincy. So you've got to be careful about where you do these high-risk moves. Yes, as we get closer towards the end of the season, going for differentials, risky moves is worth it to move up. But you've still got to temper exactly how risky they are. Obviously, if you talk to other people, they'll give you a different answer, because I'm quite risk-adverse. But there are times when you can do that, right? Selling Bruno Fernandes, for example, right? That's a calculated risk. There's definitely an element of it going wrong involved. But if it goes right, you're ahead of the curve, right? A lot of people now are going to think about it because he blanked against Palace. But for a lot of people, it will take a few more blanks before they start to do it. So it's those kind of risks that I'll be looking to take, I think. So there we go. That is it for this one. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you agree with, disagree, any questions that you've got. And obviously do hit that like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Loads more content to come. Very, very close to 150,000 subscribers now. So please do hit that button if you haven't already. And lastly, if you want to check me out on Patreon, support me and the channel even further, there's a link in the description below. Everyone that signs up goes up on the Legends wall. So thank you to everyone that already has. There's like Slack access, WhatsApp access, depending on the tier that you sign up to. All these videos converted to podcasts and all that good stuff as well. And a big shout out to AnSJ, who has signed up since the last video as well. So thank you very much to everyone that's already supporting, and thanks for all the likes, the comments, and the subscribes for YouTube as well. I'll leave that video there. I will be back tomorrow with team selection once the game week is finished. I'll have captaincy as well and a deadline stream on Saturday. So lots to look forward to. I can't wait to do it all. Thank you for watching. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.